Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Security Boulevard webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to watch it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for our speaker, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question, and we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. Also, at the end of today's webinar, we are doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Immutable Security for Immutable Infrastructure. Our speaker today is Cesar Rodriguez, who is the Head of Developer Advocacy at Accurix. Hi, Cesar. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Awesome, great. I know you've got lots of stuff to show the folks, so I'm going to go ahead and put myself on mute and let you get right into your presentation.
All right, great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Cesar Rodriguez. I'm the Head of Developer Advocacy at Accurix. So I've worked my career of securing public and private cloud environments and making sure that security controls are automated and embedded into the development lifecycle. I've done this mainly in the military industry as well as the financial industry. It's been a really interesting journey for me. I've learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes as well, and I've helped organizations I've worked at improve security posture while expanding and modernizing their technology footprint. One of the things that I learned is that while scaling and embarking on a cloud journey, the ideal way to manage and provision infrastructure is using infrastructure as code. And at the same time, from a security perspective, you want to make sure that your security controls are embedded into your code and that your code remains a source of truth for your environment. So I remember early in my career when I was working on securing a data center, we had spreadsheets and documents with operational procedures specifying each of the steps we needed to take to stand up the data center, like racking servers, installing the hypervisor software, integrating it with your environment, placing VM templates, installing software packages, making sure everything was configured correctly, that it was secure, and everything was done manually, and that approach just doesn't scale anymore. When we shift to a cloud environment, we usually have a very complex stack, and provisioning of that stack needs to be automated and immutable if we want to make sure that the quality and the reliability of our system remains consistent. So what complicates this problem is that in a cloud environment, we have multiple control planes, and this increases our attack surface from a security perspective. The second problem is that each of these control planes usually have different way to configure them and automate them. So the way you stand up your Kubernetes cluster is different than the way you stand up your VPC in AWS, and it's different that the way you're handling your virtual machines and virtualization on-prem. And this complicates the way that we govern and secure these technologies. The third problem is that when you have an emergency and you have a critical issue in your environment with business impact and need to make changes right away, your organization has probably adopted a break the glass way of allowing manual changes in your runtime production environment. And although this is acceptable, now you're potentially introducing risks and your runtime environment has drifted from the secure baseline that was established in your infrastructure as code. So reconciling these two is going to be a challenge. So the best way to solve these challenges is using immutable security. You can think about immutable security as 3 core pillars that you want to adopt in your DevOps and cloud security program. The first pillar is secure code. You want to implement security controls within the code that's going to be used to provision your environment. The second pillar is secure cloud. You want to monitor your cloud infrastructure at runtime for any type of change, and you're going to assess the risk of those changes against your controls. The third pillar is to eliminate security posture drift. This means that your infrastructure as code is going to be the baseline and source of truth for your environment, and any changes made at runtime should be compared with your code baseline, and the drift between your manual changes and your code should be eliminated while making sure that your security posture is maintained or increased. And that's the notion of immutable security, where infrastructure as code is our golden source of truth for our environment, and any changes to our environment should be reflected in that code. So let's talk about how we integrate security into your DevOps lifecycle to achieve immutable security. When you look at your typical DevOps lifecycle, it looks something like this picture, where you have the initial phase of developing your applications and your infrastructure using tools like Terraform, Kubernetes, YAML files, ECS task definitions, Ansible, and a number of other tools and configuration language depending on your architecture. And you're pushing that code into a version control repository like GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. Then that code is taken through a CI/CD pipeline for testing, building, and deploying. And finally, you have your runtime environment in a public cloud like AWS, Azure, or in your on-prem data center where you're logging and monitoring to ensure the availability and reliability of your system. So I want to walk you through how we visualize security working through this workflow. So at Acurix, the first thing we do is we convert all of the infrastructure as code across all of the developers' tooling into an intermediate language we call Cloud as Code. So in this picture, you can see Cloud as Code v0, and this helps us understand what the architecture looks like across all of your tooling. If we detect a risk, the developer will get immediate feedback on what's the issue, and we provide remediation as code that he can incorporate into the code base to eliminate that issue. So after the developer acknowledges the change and incorporates them, we can go into the next phase, which is our CI/CD pipeline. At this stage, the code is scanned as part of your continuous integration stage. If there's any security risk being introduced, your build will fail, and the developer will get feedback into how the issue can be fixed in the form of remediation as code. Once the issue is solved, the code is rescanned and your infrastructure can now be safely provisioned. So now your cloud infrastructure at time T0 is in complete sync with the infrastructure as code baseline that you have coded in CAC v0. So your T0 is in sync with Cloud as Code v0. So now let's say that after some time has passed, you had a critical issue in your runtime environment that required someone to make a manual change into the cloud itself without retrofitting that into your code. So we are calling this change at time T1. Now we generate a Cloud as Code version of this change called v1, and when we compare it to v0, we detected that your cloud environment has drifted. But doing the risk analysis, we saw that the change that you did manually actually increased the security posture of your environment. So maybe you fixed something like a publicly exposed S3 bucket, an open security group, or encrypted something that wasn't encrypted. So now, since we know this is a good change, we want to make sure that this is captured into our baseline. So using remediation as code, we open a pull request into the developer's repository, and once acknowledged and merged, your cloud at T1 is reconciled and matches what you've defined as code, and we maintain the immutability of your code remaining as the single source of truth. So now let's say that more time has passed, and at time T2, you had to do another manual change into your environment. So we generate again Cloud as Code v2, and when we compare it to v1, we detect that there's drift, but this time we see that there's changes that introduce risk into our environment. So what we want to do is that we want to restore the secure baseline that we established in v1. So we copy this as v3 and send back to the developer through remediation as code in the form of a pull request that once incorporated becomes our cloud at T3, where we have our security posture at runtime in sync with our infrastructure as code. And this cycle will continue to repeat with any change introduced into our environment, where we're achieving immutable security by checking for any risk introduced in our code on our cloud environment, and making sure that any changes are always reflected in our infrastructure as code. So now let's see how this works in a live demo. The architecture that I'm going to present is very simple, but it's going to help us visualize how we achieve immutable security. And I'm going to take you step by step into each of the automated touch points from the developer's desktop through the CI/CD pipeline and doing runtimes environment checks. So this is the architecture of what we'll be exploring today. It's been provisioned in AWS. It's a couple of EC2 instances with a load balancer in front of it inside of a VPC. And here's what my development environment looks like. Just to walk you real quick, I'm using Terraform to provision this. This is the definition for my EC2 instances. I have 2 of them, and it's simply installing Apache and echoing some text to an index.html file. In front of it, I have a load balancer that is listening in port 80 and has the 2 EC2 instances registered. And the other important thing to note is the 2 security groups that I have. I have one security group called public internet, which is attached to the load balancer and is allowing port 80 traffic from anywhere in the internet. And then I have a second security group that is attached to my web instances and EC2 instances, and they're allowing port 80 traffic from my internal network. Let me change this real quick because I want to show you what happens when we have an open security group. So at Accurix, we can integrate directly with the developer's environment through our CLI tool, which is a wrapper across infrastructure as code tooling like Terraform. This is what the CLI tool looks like. And I'm going to do an Accurix plan. And this will run Terraform under the hood and analyze the Terraform plan output for any security vulnerabilities and weaknesses. So we'll get immediate feedback here on what are the issues. And if you see a summary was reproduced here on top, that's telling me that I have 12 resources, 17 of them has security violations, 5 of them are low, we have 6 mediums and 6 highs. So if we want to dig a little bit deeper into these issues, there were 2 files that were generated. One was a reports, an Accurix reports.json file. So you can programmatically walk through these issues. And this is what the JSON looks like. And we also have an HTML report. Which gives you a high-level overview on what are the issues. At the same time, for centralized monitoring of these issues, the CLI communicates with our UI, so you're able to see all of the security violations here in line. So let me fix this violation real quick and see how it disappears from our reporting. So this is the web security group, and I'm gonna put it back with my internal CIDR block, which is actually the VPC CIDR block. And that's all right. So if we do Accurix plan, we'll see that this time we have 3 high issues instead of 6. And if we go back to the Accurix UI, I'm going to refresh my screen. And we'll see that the 3 issues related to the open security group were eliminated from our reporting. So now let's see how this integrates with our CI/CD tooling. So let me reintroduce this change real quick. Oops. So this, to show this, I'm going to show how our GitHub action works with this code. So I have a vulnerable environment GitHub repository, which is using our Acurix GitHub action. So the workflow is now being executed. So let me show you real quick while this runs, how is this configured. So this is the Acurix YAML file that's defining our GitHub action. And what it's saying is that when any code is pushed into our master branch, we run the Acurix GitHub action for scanning purposes. I'm giving it my credentials. I'm giving it my environment information for Acurix so I can push the issues into our UI. I'm using Terraform version 12.26. And I decided not to fail on violations. You can have it fail automatically on any sort of issue, but I wanted to filter down and fail only for high issues. So let's see if this completed. So this scan job is showing us the results of the scan. And if you see here, we should be able to see the same thing we saw on my desktop. Yep, there we go. On my desktop, where we have the 6 high issues, and it failed because we had high findings. If we go to the UI again, we'll see that my 6 high findings are there, and I'll filter by high findings so we can see this better. And these findings are related to the security group itself, which is exposed to the public internet, but also the EC2 instances. We have a finding attached to them because they're exposed to the public internet and the load balancer through the security groups that are open. So let me go back and close these. Okay, so now we made it available only on our internal VPC CIDR block. And I'm gonna git add, git commit, fix this issues, and git push. And I fixed the 2 high findings that it generated for me. So we'll go back to GitHub Actions. And this is my commit where I'm trying to fix all the issues that I had, all the high issues that I have, and the scan is running. So we see that in the summary, high issues are 0. And I'm getting green check marks all the way here because my high issues were completely remediated. So now let's go back and see how this works with our cloud environment. So I'm going to revert some of these changes. I'm going to make this available again on the public internet, as well as this one. I'm going to do a Terraform apply to push these changes into my cloud environment. So while these changes are there, let me walk you a little bit about what I'm seeing from my AWS console. And this is real quick what I see in terms of the load balancer that I created, which has the 2 EC2 instances in service, they're registered. If we go to this DNS record, we should be able to pull up the message that I just pushed into the EC2 instances. Both of them are healthy. And if we go to the instances, the issue that I had where these are publicly exposed, we're able to access the instance directly from the public internet, which is an issue. So let me run the scan for the environment, and I'm selected the resources that are part of this architecture. And what Acrorex here will do is scan your cloud environment. So in the first I showed you how I'm working with my infrastructure as code for my desktop, and now I want to show you how Acrorex can scan your cloud environment for security issues. While this is running, I wanted to show you the way that my environment was configured. Not this one. Yeah. Specifically this, we have multiple policies that we've defined in the product, and depending on your security requirements, you will pick the policy that's most applicable for you and for your use case. In this case, I selected the CIS benchmark policy for the demo purposes, where we have policies depending on your requirements like GDPR, HIPAA, PCI DSS, NYDFS, SOC 2. So let's see if the scan is completed. So scan is completed, and we got a couple of issues. Again, my security group is open to the internet. So there's a few actions that you can do here. From this screen, you can say that we can show the configuration of this resource. And from here, you can take multiple actions. One is to ignore this issue. You can escalate, you can create a ticket, or you can create a pull request to fix this issue. And I'll be showing that later. But the next step to achieve immutable security is to ensure that you eliminate the drift from your cloud environment and your infrastructure as code. So let's see how we can detect drift. So let's say that I had an issue that I needed to fix immediately, and I'm gonna play with one of these instances, and let's see, let's do a networking change. I'm gonna change the source destination check and enable that on this EC2 instance so we can detect the drift. So let's run my cloud scan again. And while this is running, let me show you the resource view. So with the resource view, you're able to view and filter any resources that Acrorex has detected both in your infrastructure as code, your IAC, as well as your cloud. And from this view, you're able to see the violations for each of the resources, the drift that has happened in terms of the configuration, and which resources are mapped or unmapped. Unmapped means that the resource is either in your IAC or cloud environment and hasn't been reflected in the environment itself. So you might have a resource that you created in your cloud, but it's not in your code, or you might have a resource that's in your code and it's not in your cloud. So let's see, let's go into this web resource and see what this looks like. So this is actually the instance that I just changed. And if we see if we have the violation of the HTTP port open to the internet, which is a high finding. When we look at drift, Acrorex has detected that there's two drifts here. One is the source destination check that I just demonstrated is set to false in the cloud environment, but in the IAC is set to true, which is the default for Terraform. And then the user data is not being picked up to be the same as in the cloud as in the IAC. From the change history, we can see the different changes that I've made to this infrastructure. And in the configuration section, you can see what I described earlier on the slide as cloud as code. We're converting the infrastructure as code into a configuration and the cloud as code and getting the configuration and comparing the two to see if there are drifts between the two. So I showed how do we look at security risk in our code? How do we look at security risk in our cloud? How do we detect any drift into our environment? So now I want to show real quick, how do we, one of the best ways to remediate drift from your environment and to fix security issues that you find in your environment. So let me go back to the security group, which we've been demo. And I was, let me go back to this one. In this screen, I was showing the different options earlier that we have, like showing the configuration. And for each issue, you can ignore, escalate, you can create a ticket, which can hook up into your Jira, your Slack, emails, or the last option is create a PR. So one of the issues traditionally from security teams is that when they communicate security issues to developers, you typically do it with a description of what the issue is and an example of how to fix it. But at Acrix, we think that the best way to integrate security into the development lifecycle is by issuing a pull request that will effectively eliminate the issue from the code. So from this example, we see that we have an ingress CIDR block with 000, and we can change that to my VPC CIDR block, which was /16. And we can have a title and a description for the issue. We can preview the changes. So this is the change that will be sent to the developer. So we're changing 000 to 10/16. Oops. And now, oops. Let me do that again. Now we're gonna go ahead and create the pull request. And this environment, I have it hooked up to my Bitbucket version of my vulnerable environment repository. So if we see here, we can see the drifts, we can see the incidents, if any, and we can see the pull requests. So this is the one I just opened. And when I click here, it takes me to my repository where the pull request was opened by us. So now from a developer perspective, you're receiving feedback in your code from what are the security issues, in this case, security group open to the internet, and how to fix them. So I'm gonna go ahead and approve and merge this. And this is what we're talking when we say remediation as code, giving developers the tools that they need to fix their issues right in their workflow and directly into their environment. So the last thing that I wanted to demo, and this is a sneak peek real quick, was the topology. This is where I started, where I showed you the simple architecture that I'm using for the demo. So since we have your infrastructure as code configuration and your cloud, and we know what are the security risks in both, now we can visualize what your architecture looks like. We can also visualize the security issues that you have in your architecture. And most importantly, we can visualize what are the different threats in your environment and how do these threats and these resources connect to each other. So you're able to make an effective and a better decision on what are the issues that you need to fix based on what your environment looks like. So let's get back to the slides. So these are the infrastructure as code security pillars that we discussed today. So one is we need to analyze your infrastructure as code. We can convert that to your cloud as code. And we use the same methodology to convert your resources in your cloud environment to an intermediate language where we can evaluate the changes and apply policy as code, apply security as code, and apply drift as code. And ultimately, what we want to make sure is that your organization has the tools and is empowered to fix any security issues that you deem are a risk to your business. And the best way to do that is with remediation as code, where you're sending to your development teams and your operators the issues that you think that need to be fixed as a pull request that they can directly incorporate into their software repositories. So if you want to try this out and want to explore how this would apply to your organization, you can request a free and personalized demo and consultation with us. Thanks, everyone. I think we can open it now for questions.
All right, great. We've gotten some great questions in so far, but there's plenty of time. If you have a question for Cesar, go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question, and we'll get to as many as we can. Okay, here is the first question. Let's see, my mouse will want to work for me. There we go. How often are the security policies updated?
So we are constantly updating security policies, not only to enhance what we have in terms of features that the cloud providers are doing, but also to add additional supports for any new services that our customers are requesting us. So that's our core focus of us, not only updating our security policies, but also having support for different infrastructure as code tooling.
All right, great. Next question. I noticed you can assign reviewers for changes. What built-in workflow is there?
So this integrates directly into your version control system. So from our UI, you can once you're creating your pull request, you can assign a particular reviewer, and then we basically send an API request to Bitbucket in the example that I showed, and that will be automatically assigned to the person that you selected. So it's up to the workflow that you define in your version control system, and it could be whether it's Bitbucket, GitLab, or GitHub.
Excellent. Okay. Next question. Do you have any integrations with GRC tools such as RSA Archer or ServiceNow GRC or others?
So currently the integrations that we have are, and let me show you real quick actually. So these are the integrations that we have right now. We integrate to Jira, Slack, email alerts, different version control repositories. We have integrations with CI/CD toolings like Jenkins, Travis, Circle, GitHub Actions, which is what I showed today, Splunk, and Sumo Logic. But this is an area of focus of us as well, making sure that we integrate with the tooling that will help our customers be successful.
All right. Plenty of time, guys. If you have a question for Cesar, go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and get it on in. Question for you here. How does Accurix do threat modeling?
So the way that we do threat modeling is we capture all of the different threats to your environment that we associated with each of the resources. We capture this in both the cloud and the infrastructure as code. Then we associate those threats into a breach path. So we can simulate what are the relationships of your resources to each other, what issues are high, medium, lows, and then using the MITRE attack patterns, we can show you what are the threats to your environment and how important it is for you to fix those threats.
Excellent. All right. Now, next question here. Can you integrate with it's awesome OSSIM?
So that's actually the first time I've heard about that tool. So I'll research that one.
Okay, yeah, all right, great. All right, let's see. Okay, next question here. We've gotten some really good ones in here. Can Accurix completely automate remediation?
Yep. So we allow you to define which resources you can remediate. So for example, if you decide that you don't want no one SSHing into your instances, you can set Accurix to automatically heal that issue. So if we find it in your cloud environment, it's automatically heal. And that's an option that you have when you configure Accurix.
All right, guys. We have a couple questions left, but there is plenty of time. If you do have one for Caesar, go ahead and get it on in by the GoToWebinar control panel. Let's see. Okay, here's a good one for you. Easy peasy. How is Accurix priced?
So the way that we price is based on the number of resources in your environment. We have a freemium version, community edition with TerraScan, where we have a free and open source infrastructure as code scanner. Then we have a community edition, which integrates with our UI, which is completely free. And then for the paid versions, we price based on resources.
Okay, all right, next question here. Do you integrate with the NIST OSCAL, the Open Security Controls Assessment Language?
I'm gonna have to research that one as well. I think that is something that we don't do yet.
Okay, all right, great. All right, next question. It's our last question, unless we get any more in from the audience. So, which is another easy one. How can I try Accurix?
So you can go to our website and sign up for the community edition. That's completely free. You can also go into our GitHub repository. That's github.com/Accurix, and we have TerraScan, which is a open source infrastructure as code scanner. So you can try that.
Okay. Excellent. All right, so that is the end of the questions that we have. That's all of them, but there's time. So I'm going to leave the question and answer period open for another minute or two to see if we get any more questions in from the audience. And while we're waiting, I do want to remind the audience that today's event is being recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to watch it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. We are going to be sending out an email after today's webinar that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the Security Boulevard website. So you can always go look for it there. Just go to securityboulevard.com/webinars, and then you'll be able to look in the on-demand section, not the upcoming, on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. And then while you're there, please feel free to check out other webinars that we have both upcoming and on demand. And hopefully there'll be one or two or three that pique your interest. Doesn't look like, oh, wait, maybe. Oh, okay, there's one more. Okay, so we did just get another question in. Can you integrate with Kubernetes as in terms of providing security metrics, custom reports, et cetera, as part of DevSecOps?
Yeah, so it works similarly to the way that I showed today with Terraform. We do have scanning capabilities for Kubernetes YAML files. Yeah, so that's something that we do support.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, all right. Any last minute questions? Now is the time to get them on in. And if we don't get any more in, then I'll go ahead and close it out, and we'll do the drawing for the 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, and then we'll give everybody about 15 minutes back in their day. And it doesn't look like we are getting any more questions in. So I'm going to go ahead and thank everybody who did submit questions. We had some really great ones. So thank you very much for those. And the questions that Caesar was not able to address, I am sure that he's going to be able to follow up, or somebody from Accurix will be following up with you offline to get your question answered. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and do the drawing for the 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Let's see. All right, our first winner today is Ashish M. Congratulations, Ashish. Our next winner today is, let's see, Kathy with a C, L. Congratulations, Kathy. Our next winner today is, let's see, Geetha S. Congratulations, Geetha. And our final winner today is JT. Congratulations, Jay. Congratulations to everybody who did win today. And there we go. Sorry about that. We will be following up with you guys after today's webinar via email to get your gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. If you do not see it in your inbox, please check your spam folder. Caesar, thanks so much for a great presentation. I especially enjoy those, seeing the demos. So lots of really, really fun stuff there. So thank you again for your time and your expertise. And I judging from the questions that came in from the audience, I know they got a lot out of it too. So thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Also, thanks to the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.